Good morning. I'm here with Adam Mickelson, candidate for Olathe City Council Ward 2. On behalf of the Olathe Chamber, thank you for being here today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Let's get started, Adam. Tell me a little bit about yourself and why you're seeking this office.
Yes, absolutely. So I am a decade-long resident of Olathe. My wife and I moved here for work 10 years ago to the year, and we love it here. We've since started raising a family. It's a great place to have a family. We've got great parks, great trails that I use for running, and then just great shopping, and a lot of the different attributes of Olathe are just fantastic. I'm running for office because I want to make a difference. I've been involved in watching the city political process for several years now, and involved in public hearings and talking to council members and city staff, and I believe my skill set, my knowledge, and my opinions reflect the opinions of residents, and so I think I can really make a difference, and I really want to make the city better for my two young girls.
Okay. As a candidate, what are your top 3 policy issues?
Yeah, so my 3 are public safety first, because it's one of the first priorities of the city. Infrastructure, making sure we grow with our city, and then finally responsible approach to taxes. And I'll expand a little bit on each of those. So public safety, and a good example of where I think we need to make a better impact is, the fire department 5 years ago asked for a new fire station number 8. And it took them 4 years to get that approved, which didn't make sense to me because we have 3 public safety sales taxes in the city. And I want to make sure that those public safety sales taxes are used strictly for public safety purposes. It's easier for them to access and that they make a difference. Next is infrastructure. Our city is always growing and often lagging behind on infrastructure. I could name many projects that need work. I've heard a lot from residents that Santa Fe is difficult, and it is. I don't drive Santa Fe because it's always congested. Another big one is the railroad tracks. There's 3 major intersections on the west side railroad tracks, and people are always waiting to get across those because there's trains, 80+ trains a day on those tracks. Those intersections of Santa Fe, Woodland, and Herald, those all get congested very frequently. And there's many other places going over I-35 on 119th Street. Those all need to be addressed. So we need to really work on some of our infrastructure. In addition is sidewalks. There's a place close to my neighborhood that has a school within a mile, and there's no sidewalks, no shoulders. I don't know how the kids get to walk to school, because a lot of them do, and it's concerning. And then finally, taxes. It's the first thing I hear at the door every single time I talk to a resident. Taxes are high, and especially if you have a fixed income, it's a problem. And so I want to make sure we take a responsible approach, say no when it makes sense, and there's times it does make sense. The street maintenance sales tax is a good tax. I hear lots of good feedback on it. But one that doesn't make sense is there's a CID at 135th and K7 that actually put a 1% tax on food. And so we have 10.5% on food at that area. And that's not an area that can handle 10.5% tax on food. And those are the ones that, even though it passed unanimously, I think we need to say no to. And so that's where I think I differ from the current council.
What are your views on the value Olathe citizens receive for their local tax dollars? And what changes, if any, would you propose to the city budget? Yeah,
so this is one that receives really high remarks. So I pay attention to the Direction Finder survey that the city does every year, and it's one of the highest rated things. Olathe has a lot of good services. We have trash that most cities don't have, and that's a good service that people pay for and don't have to worry about, and it happens every week without fail. And so those are some of the good services the city provides. With that, though, I do think there are some changes to the budget that need to be addressed. First thing I would consider is, let's talk about where we are with the mill levy. Every year, people's taxes go up purely because their house values go up. And so I think, considering how the mill levy is affected by that, and yes, they've increased the mill levy recently, but it wasn't even close to making up for the increase in house values and the taxes associated with that. Next is contractual services. The city pays tens of millions of dollars in contractual services. And me being in an industry where contract work is actually fairly common, I know from experience, contract work is often 3 to 4 times more expensive than your own labor. And so I think we need to find a better balance between, maybe we need to bring on some part-time people, or how can we make that balance between contractual services and employees to help reduce that burden, because I know we're paying quite a steep price for labor when you pay for contract work. Another one is just maybe not an actual change, but more insight into our sales taxes. I've kind of mentioned that already, but sales taxes we have several different avenues for sales taxes, and kind of, maybe being clear on which one's bringing in how much, so that we know, oh, this is actually a public safety sales tax. Let's make sure that goes to a new fire station or additional police needs, instead of just going to the general fund. Right now, all sales taxes kind of lumped together, at least to the public. I'm sure they track it internally, but to the public and citizens, we see it as all as one lump sum, when there's actually different sales taxes for different purposes, and we need to make sure we are just a little more clear on how we track those and share that with citizens. And then, there's a few other things I look into. I'm one that likes to, find where there's, potential waste, and just find those spots. I don't know specifically where those are, but, I would talk to each director individually and say, hey, where might there be some waste? I've heard of citizens complaining about pallets of sod just going to waste. And while it doesn't seem like much, but if you add up, pallets of sod here, and pipes there, and too much labor in a different place, it adds up. And so I think we need to find those different areas, and kind of trim some of those and save costs, not just tax more.
Over the past 20 years, the City of Olathe's development has outpaced other Johnson County communities.
Yes.
How would you help continue high-quality growth in Olathe, and what role, if any, do you believe the city should play in economic development to bring jobs and capital investment?
Yeah, absolutely. So the city has done a good job, and I think a lot of that's just organic. The county itself is growing, and Olathe is a great place to grow because we have a lot of room. I think I would definitely want to decrease some of our regulations. I think our regulations are a little bit too high sometimes. There was one that actually one of the council members stated as it would be the greatest tax increase the city would have ever done if approved. Those kind of things we really have to be careful, because too many regulations will just drive away development, and the developers will go to areas where it's a little easier to develop. And so I think we need to be careful with our regulations. There's a lot of adjusting of our development code, and I think we need to only do it when it makes sense, instead of just doing it because we want to change stuff. And so I think we need to be very careful on adding more regulations. So for me, I'm more of a low regulations person, so I want to make sure that some stuff doesn't make sense, and I would prefer we cut those out and then be careful with the stuff we add. So I think just really encouraging development by making it easier to develop here is huge. As far as what roles the city plays, often development incentives are very common around here. And I understand it. It does lure developers to the area, but I also think it puts a high burden on taxpayers. There's one development in this area that has requested and so far been approved for almost all of four different development incentives for one development. 3 of the 4 have already been approved. And to me, even if it's a large, and this is an out-of-state developer on top of that, to me, 4 incentives in one development is too much. Like I already mentioned, there's also one that has a CID on food. And I think we need to have them in places where it's blighted, or in very expensive projects like this one with the out-of-state developer. Something makes sense, but not 4. And so I think there's a role to play. Development incentives are a tool, but it's only one tool. Connections, just going and talking to companies, telling them why it's a great place to work here, that's also a role, not just incentives. And I think too often we go to the development incentives versus just convincing them on our attributes of the city and why we're a great place to work. And I'll talk probably a little bit more later about it, but what I bring to the table to help with those conversations.
What do you think are the 3 greatest opportunities or challenges for the Olathe economy in the next 10 years, and how would you capitalize on those?
Yeah, so a big one is technology. So I think we all know technology is constantly changing. It doesn't stay the same. I mean, 10 years ago, we barely had the iPhone. And so we really have to be on top of technology and make sure that as technology advances, that we adopt it. And we need to be early adopters, whether it's changes to our traffic signals and how they communicate, whether it's, predictive traffic patterns so we can help, better choose which roads need to be updated. And so I think technology is always a huge challenge. I can't tell you today what the technology is going to be like in 5 years, but we definitely need to be on top of it. And my technology background is really going to help with the city and guiding some of that direction as far as we need to be on top of technology. Next is infrastructure, and how more transportation specifically, and we're going to have self-driving cars? Will we be more reliant on, things like Uber, where we won't own cars potentially? We don't know what the future holds from a transportation perspective. But again, it's one of those things that I think we really need to pay attention to and be on the forefront of technology and transportation innovations. And then finally, a little more organic is just growth. Just by its placement within the county, with a lot of room to grow south and west, Olathe has a huge potential to grow, and we can capitalize on that by convincing businesses, hey, this is a great place to move here, because not only do we have a great base of people that live here that can work for you, we have tons of room to grow. And so just the ability to grow is a huge opportunity for Olathe.
What do you believe most distinguishes you from your other opponent in this race, making you the best suited to serve?
Sure. So I could talk for a while on policy, and I have a bit on policy already, but I want to focus more on what I bring to the table personally. So I'm a technology person, as I've already stated. So that's one of the most important things. I have connections. I have knowledge that's not on the council today. If a technology question is brought to the council, they don't have the background to say, does this make sense or does it not? I do. I'm a software engineer. I know how this stuff works, and if I don't, it wouldn't take me long to figure out. And so that's something I bring. Not only do I bring the knowledge, I also bring connections. I know small startups who are working in coworker spaces today. They won't stay there for long. These companies will grow. They'll be the next Garmin. And so I have the connections that I can talk to these people and say, hey, I know you're in this space now. I know you're about to grow out of it. Come to Olathe and convince them why. And so I think I have both the knowledge and the connections to bring a huge impact that we don't have and never have had on the council so far. Next is just purely demographics. We don't have a ton of different demographics on the council. I represent the median age of Olathe, actually, if you go look at demographic studies. And so I think it's a good start. I think we need a little bit more variety of demographics on the council, and I believe I bring at least the median age to the council. So that's a start, and so I definitely bring that as well. So, and then we also obviously have policy differences. I definitely bring a more conservative approach to fiscal policy that I think would just allow me to ask different questions, more questions. There was a star bond discussion in a neighboring city, and they talked about it for almost 3 hours, I believe it was. We had a very similar conversation about a very similar development. It was less than 30 minutes. And questions just aren't being asked. I'm just a natural, person who just loves to ask questions and wants to figure out how things work. And so I think I would, ask different and better questions than are asked today, and instead of just taking the status quo and say, hey, does it make sense? And I'll tell you that resonates with citizens. I've talked to lots of citizens, and it's very important. And I think that is definitely something valuable that citizens appreciate. And so, my background, my experience is very different, and I think that will add a lot of value to the council.
On behalf of the Olathe Chamber, thank you for participating in this video, Adam. We wish you the best of luck in your campaign.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you.